All right, let's start asking some really big business questions now that we have our feet under us about some basic data visualization types for the bookshop dataset. In particular, I think the natural thing to want to know more about is the sales, like what's going on with sales, what books are selling the most, what authors are selling the most, how can we start pulling apart these sales insights to start helping us make some better business decisions potentially. So let's make a new sheet. And let's take a look at what's actually in sales. So we have a sale date, which is a dimension. We have the count of sales. And let's just start right there. So obviously, at some point, we need to bring price in to see like actual sales in dollars or euros. But for right now, let's leave that by the wayside. So let's bring sales. So if you have a date, typically that's always the column because we have time along the horizontal axis. And let's just do sales count along the rows here. So what's going on? We only have one data point. That's obviously not super helpful. Notice that while sales has been aggregated by count, the sale date here has actually been aggregated just down to the year. And so the entire year is getting collapsed. So this is the total amount of sales we made in the entire year 2193. So this is a synthetic data set. This is obviously far into the future or whatever. And in this particular year, we made about 56,000 sales. But obviously, we want to see this on a finer level of detail in terms of time. And so if we click the little triangle next to the variable name here, we can see that we can actually break it down into a number of different ways. And let's actually just do by the day, like the full-on day, like month, day, year. And so this graph probably looks like a mess if you haven't seen or dealt with time series before, but to people that have seen time series, this actually kind of looks like what you might expect in the sense that it is messy, but there are regular patterns that we can pick up on. So for instance, we see a kind of sawtooth pattern that might indicate periodicity, that we're selling books at a higher rate on some days or in some periods than in other periods. And this is fairly regular. It goes up and it goes down. It goes up and it goes down. We have a business cycle. But then there's also a longer term cycle here where maybe, so this is starting in January and ending in December. It seems like we don't sell very many books in the winter, but then we sell quite a bit more books during the summer, but then it drops during the fall, but then it spikes before the holidays. So maybe there are things that we can pull apart here. All of this has to do with aggregation, which is at what level are we actually looking at the data. So at the beginning, we were aggregating based on the year. Now we're actually breaking it down into the day. And so you can imagine if our sale data are actually broken down to like the second that the sale was made, we've aggregated here too. We've lumped everything that was sold on the same day into just one data point. So in some sense, no matter how we're dealing with data, we're always aggregating one way or another. And so in that sense, aggregating is a big design decision that will help us inform some decisions and help us either make it easier to see insights or make it more difficult to really realize what's going on. So let's try to do two different types of aggregation in order to see two different aspects of this data. So we basically have short-term fluctuations and long-term fluctuations. Let's do short-term first, the really spiky kind of constant stuff. So let's see what's going on there. So let's aggregate instead of by the day. We could aggregate by the year, the quarter, the month, the day, or more. And under this more, there's actually week number. So this is 1 to 52. Or we can do weekday. So this is like Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, all that. So let's aggregate by weekday. And sure enough, we see there is a strong relationship between what day of the week it is and how many units we're selling. So for instance, we sell almost twice as many books on a Saturday as we do on like a Tuesday. So we sell 10,815 units on average on Saturdays versus, I'm sorry, that I have to be very precise there. We're still counting, right? So we are selling, we sold 10,815 total units across all Saturdays in this data set because we're counting them all up versus 6,230 total sales on all Tuesdays in this data set. So remember, we're counting, and so in fact, this is all of them. So this is really indicating that we have strong weekend sales and relatively mild or anemic weekday sales. And so the question then is, you as a business person have to decide, well, what do I do with this? The question then becomes a business one of like, well, does that mean I need to have different inventory control on the weekends, or do I need to increase staffing on the weekends, or can I decrease staffing in the week, or do I want to have book events during the weekdays in order to drive up sales where they're low, or do I want to put it on the weekend where they're already high? There's no right answer, but the point, I'm sure actually there is a right answer, but it depends on your particular context. The point I'm making from a quantitative perspective or from a data visualization perspective is that we have to first have these insights in hand before we can even start asking those questions. So think of visualizations not necessarily as something that answers a question, but that like further allows you to ask questions, like what really expands what you're able to ask meaningfully about how to run your business. Okay, so that's one thing. But let's, instead of doing weekday, let's do month. And what do we see? Something really similar to what we saw earlier, right? Basically kind of pulling everything back out, where we have very, very strong sales in the summer months, namely July and August, relatively weak sales in the fall, even worse sales in the middle kind of a winter, and then kind of a boost in sales right before the holidays. So the point here is that we can start to break down not just time series, although it's one good application, but many data sets at various levels of aggregation in order to pull out different insights. And so here we're doing it at the time level, but we might think about it as, you know, the store, the region, the district, the state. We might think about it as the team, the group, the division, department. Like, there's so many different ways that you can think about drilling down or pulling out of data structures in order to get different ideas about what's going on at what level, and then what we're supposed to do with the insights we've attained.